In this video, we're going to talk about online teaching versus classroom teaching. We're going to look at some of the differences, but most of the focus is going to be on online teaching and comparing it, how it's different from traditional classroom teaching. So let's talk a little bit about the online learner. So just like traditional students, online students need an active instructor. So picture yourself if you were in a traditional classroom and you just went and sat in the corner. You didn't introduce yourself. You didn't tell the students what chapter they were going to be doing today. You didn't talk about the labs. You just sat in the corner and hoped that they were able to figure out what they were supposed to do. Well, that may sound silly in a traditional classroom, but it's very easy to do that in an online classroom. If you simply just lay out material and then sit in the corner, the students could be lost and they don't know what to do. So they need a guide. Just like in an online classroom, they need a guide. Just like in a traditional classroom, your students need a guide. They need you to be active in the course and to help them. They need you to frequently communicate with them. In a traditional class, you might remind them at the end of the class something's going to be due soon. You might say some other important things throughout your lecture. We'll do the same thing for your online students. You have Quick Mail in Moodle, which can send individual or group emails to students. You also have the announcements forum in Moodle, where you can use to send out an announcement to all students, and they can go back and look at the announcement. Feedback is also another critical way you can communicate with your students. When they turn in their assignments, give them quick turnaround so they can get feedback so they can improve for the next assignments. Most importantly, just like in traditional classes, your students need you. They need you to be there. They need you to be active. They need you to give them feedback. And so picture your students in your online environment just like your traditional environment. They need to hear from you. They need to be given direction and instructions. So a little bit about the online learner. The environment plays an important part with the online learner. Just like the traditional classroom, if you're teaching a classroom and you don't have the proper tools, things can go wrong. If you don't know how to use the tools in the classroom, things can go wrong. The same thing for online. In a traditional classroom, you have power, you have computers, you have a lot of things in there. If the power goes out, it's really hard to teach. If the computers aren't working, it's really hard to teach. And there's some other things that can fall in line in the same way in online classes. Technology can and does fail. The power can go out in a traditional classroom. The heating and air can turn off. And in an online classroom, there can be problems as well. The students could have problems with their own computer, which is the most common. They can lose access to the internet and have difficulties connecting to their class. So there's a number of different things that can happen. So keep that in mind when you're teaching in the online learning environment. There are a lot of family distractions and home distractions in online learning, in addition to the traditional learning. So at least you have them in the traditional learning in class where their kids aren't there, their husband or wife isn't there, and you have their sole focus. Whereas in online learning, they could be reading your material and going over your course with their kids and family right there in the room with them. So it's a different environment, and keep that in mind when you're creating instruction and when you're interacting with the students. Remember, loneliness and isolation can occur in an online environment. So make sure you're making connections with the students. Make sure you're having assignments where students can collaborate together, if just in a discussion forum to find out what each other's going through or to get each other's perspectives, to let them know there's other students in the class. You want to minimize that isolation feeling. And the way you do that is connect with students by emailing them, keeping in touch with them, giving them quick feedback, and giving them opportunities to interact with each other. And also remember, procrastination is still a problem in online learning. It didn't go away because the environment's different. Students tend to put off their work towards the end of the deadline. So keep these things in mind. Post reminders just like you would if you were in a traditional class, and help the students and encourage them to get their work done on time instead of procrastinating. So here's some tips for teaching online. It's very important to define what is appropriate behavior. So just like in a traditional classroom, do not assume that students know your expectations of them. Things like plagiarism, cheating, how often you want them in the course looking at materials, your due date policies, your late policies, all of these things, let them know what appropriate behavior is. And you can use your syllabus and the assignment instructions to lay out your expectations and be very clear with the students. If you're giving them an online test and you don't want them to use the book, then explain that. If you don't want them to use any notes that they've taken, explain that. If you don't mind them using it, then also explain that to them. Lay out what you expect the students to do. If there's particular file types that you want it in, if there's particular formats, be specific and you'll get higher quality submissions from your students. And make sure you place those expectations in the assignments. That's the best place, but you can also put them in announcements, forums, and the syllabus. So some more tips. Students run into technical problems in online environments. One of the best things you can inform them to do is stick with Firefox. That's the best browser for them to use right now. Have them use Chrome as a backup. If they're having trouble with Firefox, they can switch back and forth between Chrome and Firefox. Make sure to have them keep it up to date and just ask them, have they updated it? If they're having technical problems that you're not able to answer, have them submit a support ticket on the MySCC page, and the Distance Learning Department can answer those technical questions. And remember, when students are having technical problems, use caution, but also use concern too. They may be having these problems, or they may be coming up with excuses why they're submitting work late. So just remember, concern is important, but also use some caution.